Hey guys, we're going to read chapter 11 today of Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. Okay, and we're getting towards the big parts, I think. We're more than halfway through, and I think we're going to have a lot of excitement coming up with this. I want you to think about what we talked about as far as following multiple plot lines from our session last week. I hope that you all watched that. I made that video about how we have to keep track of multiple problems, because as we're going to be reading more, you're going to see that there are a lot of things going on. Okay, so right now we've got one problem, which is Edmund with the witch, right? So he left the beaver's house, he went to the witch, he told her all about Aslan coming and meeting at the stone table. So that's its own plot line. That's a story that's going to be happening. And then we have other stories within this. So now we've got the kids who are with the beavers, the rest of them, everyone except Edmund, and they are going to be trying to get to the stone table before the witch does, because they kind of found out that Edmund, or they assumed, I should say, that Edmund went to go tell the witch. So right now we've got two storylines going on. We've got Edmund's own storyline, really, if you think about it, and then we've got the rest of the kids. Now, at some point, they will kind of meet, but this is where you have to keep track of those problems, okay? Edmund's got a lot of problems because, he might be thinking that he's doing the right thing, but we as readers know that he's really not. Do you think at this point Edmund realizes that he's wrong? And will he realize that he's wrong? Okay, that's what's going to be important to think about and to just to have an opinion on while we are going through this. Okay, so let's get started. We've got some vocabulary words here. The first word is repulsive. Okay, and that means just disgusting and absolutely awful. Okay, if something is repulsive, that's like a really, really extreme word. Okay, a gaiety is merry-making celebration. Vermin is common, harmful, or objectionable animals. So a lot of times people will call rats vermin, mice vermin. So they're animals that people don't really think highly of. You would never call a cat or a dog vermin, but you would call things like rats and mice and animals like that. Gluttony is excess in eating or drinking. So if you're gluttonous, you've eaten or drinking too much, and it's like you feel just so full and stuffed. Like, think about Thanksgiving, okay? Glade is an open space surrounded by woods, and alighting is landing. And I don't have any expressions today. All right, I'm just going to pause this for a sec. Okay, so let's go. This chapter is called Aslan is Nearer. Edmund, meanwhile, had been having a most disappointing time. When the dwarf had gone to get the sledge ready, he expected that the witch would start being nice to him, as she had been at their last meeting. Now remember, the last meeting is when he first met her. She was so nice. She gave him the Turkish delight. She told him eventually she would love to make him king. This was not really the expectation I think he had when he was coming to meet her again. I think that he thought she was going to be so happy to see him, but in reality, she's not. But she said nothing at all. And when at last Edmund plucked up his courage to say, "Please, your majesty, could I have some Turkish delight? You said..." She answered, "Silence, fool!" Then she appeared to change her mind and said, as if to herself, "And yet it will not do to have the brat fainting on the way." And once more she clapped her hands. Another dwarf appeared. "Bring the human creature food and drink," she said. The dwarf went away and presently returned, bringing an iron bowl with some water in it and an iron plate with a hunk of dry bread on it. He grinned in a repulsive manner, in a disgusting manner, as he set them down on the floor beside Edmund and said, "Turkish delight for the little prince, ha ha ha." "Take it away," said Edmund sulkily. "I don't want dry bread." But the witch suddenly turned on him with such a terrible expression on her face that he apologized and began to nibble at the bread, though it was so stale he could hardly get it down. "You may be glad enough of it before you taste bread again," said the witch. Whew. There's a little picture, of Edmund and that little elf, or dwarf, I should say, bringing him the dry bread, not the Turkish delight that he was promised, huh? So Edmund maybe was wrong about the witch. While he was still chewing away, the first dwarf came back and announced that the sledge was ready. The white witch rose and went out, ordering Edmund to go with her. The snow was again falling as they came into the courtyard, but she took no notice of that and made Edmund sit beside her on the sledge. But before they drove off, she called Malgrim, who, remember, that's the chief wolf of of her secret police. So he's the wolf in charge. And he came bounding like an enormous dog to the side of the sledge. "Take with you the swiftest of your wolves and go at once to the house of the beavers," said the witch, "and kill whatever you find there. If they had already gone, then make all speed to the stone table, but do not be seen. Wait for me there in hiding. I, meanwhile, must go many miles to the west before I find a place where I can drive across the river. You may overtake these humans before they reach the stone table. You will know what to do if you find them." "I hear and obey, O Queen," growled the wolf, and immediately he shot away into the snow and the darkness, as quickly as a horse can gallop. In a few minutes he had called another wolf and was with him down the dam and sniffing at the beaver's house. But of course they found it empty. It would have been a dreadful thing for the beavers and the children if the night had remained fine, for the wolves would have then been able to follow their trail. So because it snowed, and they had that little snowstorm, the wolves were not able to follow the entire trail of the kids and the beavers. Okay, so thankfully the wolves went to the beaver's house and they weren't there. So that was good news because he was ordered to kill them if he saw them. But now that the snow had begun again, the scent was cold and even the footprints were covered up. Meanwhile, the dwarf whipped up the reindeer, and the witch and Edmund drove out under the archway and on and away into the darkness and the cold. This was a terrible journey for Edmund, who had no coat. Before they had been going a quarter of an hour, all the front of him was covered with snow. He soon stopped trying to shake it off because as quickly as he did, a new lot gathered, and he was so tired. Soon he was wet to the skin, and oh, how miserable he was. It didn't look now as if the witch intended to make him a king. All the things he had said to make himself believe that she really was good and kind, and that her side was really the right side, sounded silly to him now. He would have given anything to meet the others at this moment, even Peter. The only way to comfort himself now was to try to believe that the whole thing was a dream and that he might wake up at any moment. And as soon as they went on, hour after hour, it did come to seem like a dream. Edmund is having a change of heart. I don't know. Do you believe that he actually is sorry for thinking good about the witch? He went against everything that his brother and sister said. He kind of tried to prove them wrong. And now Edmund is with the witch, who is proving herself to be a terrible person. This lasted longer than I could describe, even if I wrote pages and pages about it. But I will skip on to the time when the snow had stopped and the morning had come, and they were racing along in the daylight. And still they went on and on with no sound but the everlasting swish of the snow and the creaking of the reindeer's harness. And then at last the witch said, "What have we here? Stop!" And they did. How Edmund hoped she was going to say something about breakfast, but she had stopped for quite a different reason. A little way off, at the foot of the tree, sat a merry party. A squirrel and his wife, with their children, and 2 satyrs and a dwarf, and an old dog fox, all on stools round a table. Edmund couldn't quite see what they were eating, but it smelled lovely, and there seemed to be decorations of holly, and he wasn't at all sure, but he did see something like plum pudding. At the moment when the sledge stopped, the fox, who was obviously the oldest person present, had just risen to its feet, holding a glass in its right paw as if it were going to say something. But when the whole party saw the sledge stopping and who was on it, all the gaiety went out of their faces. All the merriness, all the happiness went out of their faces. The father squirrel stopped eating with his fork halfway to his mouth, and one of the satyrs stopped with its fork actually in its mouth. And the baby squirrels squeaked with terror. So picture this, okay? This little table with stools and all these animals celebrating, and they're happy, and there's decorations, and they're eating, and they're drinking, and everything's great. And all of a sudden they see this sleigh come, and they look, and they just sort of freeze because they're thinking, oh my God, one of them still had a fork in its mouth. They were speechless because it was the witch. Possibly feeling frightened? What is the meaning of this? Asked the witch queen. Nobody answered. Speak, vermin. So she called them vermin. Remember I said vermin is like a terrible, disgusting animal. Or do you want my dwarf to find you a tongue with his whip? What is the meaning of all this gluttony, this waste, this self-indulgence? Where did you get all of these? Please, your majesty, said the fox, we were given them. And if I might make so bold as to drink to your majesty's very good health. Who gave them to you? Father Christmas, stammered the fox. What? Roared the witch, springing from the sledge and taking a few strides nearer to the terrified animals. He has not been here. He cannot have been here. How dare you say? But no. Tell me you've been lying, and you shall even now be forgiven. At that moment, one of the youngest squirrels lost its head completely. He has! It squeaked, beating its little spoon on the table. Edmund saw the witch bite her lips so hard that a drop of blood appeared on her white cheek. Then she raised her wand. Oh, don't, please don't, shouted Edmund. But even while he was shouting, she had waved her wand, and instantly, where the party had been, there were only statues of creatures. One with a stone fork fixed forever halfway to its stone mouth, seated round a stone table, which there were stone plates and a stone plum pudding. As for you, said the witch, giving Edmund a stunning blow on the face as she remounted the sledge, let that teach you to ask a favor for spies and traitors. Drive on. Here was that little party. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see. I'm like holding it up, but it's tiny. All right, there's that little party there. And then they're back on the sledge. Well, the witch doesn't seem so great now to Edmund, does she? And Edmund, for the first time in this story, felt sorry for someone besides himself. It seemed so pitiful to think of those little stone figures sitting there all the silent days and all the dark nights, year after year, till the moss grew on them, and at last even their little faces crumbled away. Now they were steadily racing on again, and soon Edmund noticed that the snow, which splashed against them as they rushed through it, was much wetter than it had been out all last night. At the same time, he noticed that he was feeling much less cold. It was also becoming foggy. In fact, every minute it grew foggier and warmer, and the sledge was not running nearly as well as it had been running up till now. At first, he thought this was because the reindeer were tired, but soon he saw that couldn't be the real reason. The sledge jerked and skidded and kept on jolting as if it had struck against stones. And however the dwarf whipped the poor reindeer, the sledge went slower and slower. There also seemed to be a curious noise all around them, but the noise of their driving and the jolting and the dwarfs shouting at the reindeer prevented Edmund from hearing what it was, until suddenly the sledge stuck so fast that it wouldn't go on at all. When that happened, there was a moment's silence, and in that silence Edmund could at last listen to the other noise properly. A strange, sweet, rustling, chattering noise, and yet not so strange, for he had heard it before, if only he could remember where. Then at once he did remember. It was the noise of running water. All around them, though out of sight, there were streams, chattering, murmuring, bubbling, splashing, and even in the distance, roaring, and his heart gave a great leap, though he hardly knew why. When he realized that the frost was over, and much nearer there was a drip, drip, drip from the branches of all the trees, And then, as he looked at one tree, he saw a great load of snow slide off it, and for the first time since he had entered Narnia, he saw the dark green of a fir tree. But he hadn't time to listen or watch any longer, for the witch said, "Don't sit staring, fool! Get out and help!" And of course, Edmund had to obey. He stepped out into the snow, but it was really only slush by now, and began helping the dwarf to get the sledge out of the muddy hole it had gotten into. They got it out in the end, and by being very cruel to the reindeer, the dwarf managed to get it onto the move again, and they drove a little further. Now the snow was really melting in earnest, and patches of green grass were beginning to appear in every direction. Unless you have looked at the world of snow as long as Edmund had been looking at it, you will hardly be able to imagine what a relief those green patches were, even after the endless white. Then the sledge stopped again. So picture, I know we haven't had a good snow in a really long time, okay, but picture a big snowstorm, and you like it, right? In the beginning, you can go sledding, you can do this, everything's great, and then after a while, you just get tired of looking at that snow that's stuck on your lawn, and you kind of ache for spring, right? You want to hear birds chirping, you want to see the green grass, and for the people of Narnia, it has been years, okay, since they've seen any grass because it's just been completely covered in snow. Because remember, there was a spell that made it always winter and never Christmas. It snowed every day, so there was never a chance for it to get warm for the snow to melt. Now, all of a sudden, the snow is melting and they're seeing grass, and the waters, the rivers, the streams are no longer iced over. They're hearing running water. Okay, so picture a running, a creek, and being able to listen to that babbling of the water. All right, and Edmund is sort of feeling relieved to see this, which is funny because last chapter, I would never think that Edmund would want to see any good come, right? He just seemed like a character that we were stuck with, and he was just as bad as the witch herself. "It's no good, your majesty," said the dwarf. "We can't sledge in this thaw." Thaw is when things that are frozen become unfrozen. They thaw out. "Then we must walk," said the witch. "We shall never overtake them walking," growled the dwarf. "Not with the start they've got." "Are you my counselor or my slave?" said the witch. "Do as you're told. Tie the hands of the human creature behind it, and keep hold of the end of the rope, and take your whip. Cut the harness off the reindeer. They'll find their own way home." The dwarf obeyed, and in a few minutes Edmund found himself being forced to walk as fast as he could with his hands tied behind him. He kept on slipping in the slush and mud and wet grass, and every time he slipped, the dwarf gave him a curse and sometimes a flick with the whip. The witch walked behind the dwarf and kept saying, "Faster, faster!" Every moment the patches of green grew bigger, and the patches of snow grew smaller. Every moment more and more of the trees shook off their robes of snow. Soon, wherever you looked, instead of white shapes, you saw the dark green of firs or the black prickly branches of bare oaks and beeches and elms. Then the mist turned from white to gold and presently cleared away altogether. Shafts of delicious sunlight struck down onto the forest floor, and overhead you could see a blue sky between the treetops. I'm going to stop here to give you your secret code word, which is going to be spring. Okay? The code word is spring. I'm going to continue now. You need to continue listening to this because there are going to be some questions about this chapter that I'm going to ask you based on the ending of this. Soon there were more wonderful things happening. Coming suddenly around a corner into a glade of silver birch trees, Edmund saw the ground covered in all directions with little yellow flowers. The noise of water grew louder. Presently they actually crossed a stream. Beyond it they found snowdrops growing. That's a type of flower. "Mind your own business," said the dwarf when he saw that Edmund had turned his head to look at them, and he gave the rope a vicious jerk. Here's a little picture of Edmund being whipped and forced to walk really, really quickly. So Edmund's in the lead, and then the dwarf behind him yelling at him, "Faster, faster," and whipping him. And then the queen is taking up the caboose. But of course, this didn't prevent Edmund from seeing. Only 5 minutes later, he noticed a dozen crocuses growing round the foot of an old tree, golden, purple, and white. Then came a sound even more delicious than the sound of the water. Close beside the path, they were following a bird. Sorry, let me read that again. Close beside the path they were following, a bird suddenly chirped from the branch of a tree. It was answered by the chuckle of another bird, a little further off. And then, as if that had been a signal, there was chattering and chirruping in every direction, and then a moment of full song. And within 5 minutes, the whole wood was ringing with birds' music. And wherever Edmund's eyes turned, he saw birds alighting on branches, or sailing overhead, or chasing one another, or having their little quarrels, or tidying up their feathers with their beaks. Faster, faster, said the witch. There was no trace of the fog now. The sky became bluer and bluer, and now there were white clouds hurrying across it from time to time. In the wide glades there were primroses. A light breeze sprang up, which scattered drops of moisture from the swaying branches and carried cool, delicious scents against the faces of the travelers. The trees began to fully come alive. The larches and birches were covered with green. The laburnums were gold. Soon the beech trees had put forth their delicate transparent leaves. As the travelers walked under them, the light also became green. A bee buzzed across their path. "This is no thaw," said the dwarf, suddenly stopping. "This is spring. What are we to do? Your winter has been destroyed. I tell you, this is Aslan's doing." "If either of you mentions that name again," said the witch, "he shall instantly be killed." So basically, the next person that says Aslan's name, she's going to kill them. Hooey! Edmund sure has himself in some trouble here, doesn't he? I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. I'm going to have you do a Flipgrid, okay? And in that Flipgrid, I want you to tell me what you think Edmund is feeling. Do you think he is feeling regret? Do you think he wishes he never went to the witch? Do you think he's feeling, okay, this is bad, but maybe not so bad? I want to know, okay? Give me your response on Flipgrid, and we will talk about this next time. All right, bye.